An absolutely insane story has unfolded in Indianapolis involving former NFL quarterback Mark Sanchez. And hi, welcome to another episode of At Least You Heard It Here. I'm your host, Alyse Adamson. And today's topic is the stabbing of Mark Sanchez. And for those of you who have not heard about this story yet, on Saturday, October 4th, news reports began to come out that former NFL quarterback and Fox Sports analyst Mark Sanchez had been stabbed. And of course, just like anyone else reading this news, I thought that's awful. How could he have been stabbed? The report had him in Indianapolis because he was supposed to be calling a game there the next day. And it all seemed very odd because even in those initial reports, Mark Sanchez was not being listed as a victim. Police were describing the incident as isolated between two individuals. So I thought it was strange, but needed more facts. A couple of hours later, the police initial report is released, and it appears as though Mark Sanchez was the initial aggressor. Apparently, Mark Sanchez was in an alleyway doing wind sprints, acting erratically. I believe the ultimate victim, who we'll get to, described him as potentially intoxicated, or someone said he was potentially intoxicated. There's not been proven yet. So we don't know what was going on with Mark Sanchez. But what we do know is that a grease truck driver pulled into that alleyway, and Mark Sanchez got upset about where this guy was parked. And this grease truck driver was a 69-year-old man. People, that's a senior citizen. I think the reports have him at like 5'8", 165 pounds. Mark Sanchez is 38 years old. He's 6'2" and reportedly 235 pounds. So already we have a huge weight and age disparity. But I think the better question is, why is Mark Sanchez concerned about what a grease truck driver is doing in like an alleyway, exchanging cooking oil for some hotel? Like, why does it even matter? Okay, we need to understand the facts. I could sit here and speculate, but there's no point. Like, he clearly was not in his right mind. So a fight ensues, and Mark Sanchez apparently just starts to beat this man. Reports say that this 69-year-old was thrown up against a dumpster and then to the ground. The man, I believe his name is Perry Toole, tried to fight Sanchez off, used pepper spray first. That stunned Sanchez for a moment, but then Sanchez continued his attack. And so finally, the victim took out a knife he carried on him and stabbed Sanchez in what he is saying is self-defense. Okay, so all of this is coming out like mere hours after Sanchez is stabbed. And Sanchez went to the hospital in critical condition, went into surgery, and was just like downgraded to stable condition at the time that the reports are changing. Like, Sanchez might be the aggressor here. And so it's bad and like there's merit to these claims because Sanchez was then arrested in the hospital. So imagine you have just been stabbed 3 times in the chest. You've undergone life-saving surgery, and the police come to your hospital bed and they charge you with 3 misdemeanors. And that's what it was initially. It was a battery count that resulted in injury. It was a public intoxication. This is another reason I'm saying he was probably intoxicated. Again, we've got to wait till the facts come out. And an unauthorized entry into a vehicle. That would be that truck. So Sanchez is arrested in bed, essentially. Then the reports come out and say that there are videos, surveillance videos. This area that he was in was high traffic and had a lot of surveillance. And so at this point, I'm a former prosecutor. I know that the video is most likely pretty conclusive on the question of initial aggressor and self-defense. An initial aggressor just means who started it, who started this fight, and was the person who ultimately used deadly force justified in using deadly force to repel this attack. And we have the facts of the initial pepper spray attempt. We have the fact that Sanchez was so much younger and larger than this individual. And then we have the victim's injury. So, okay, so we have the video. So detectives have viewed this and they have now charged Sanchez. So like I said, I think we can safely say that the video corroborates the victim's account. And then we have the victim himself. Like, extremely, extremely gory photos of this deep laceration, this deep, deep cut on this old man's face. So deep that the old man, reportedly the victim, is now having trouble speaking. And I'll show you what the picture looks like. I just warning for those of you who are viewing this and not just listening to it, that is extremely graphic. So Sanchez's charges have now been upgraded to a felony because the injury to the victim is so severe. And that happens in most cases. The more severe the injury, the higher the charge, essentially. You know, in different states, they call it different things, but think of like an aggravated battery. Someone got really, really hurt. This victim went to the hospital. So now Sanchez is facing a felony. He was supposed to have an initial appearance on the Tuesday after this attack. He waived that hearing, so now he's going back to court. I believe it's November 4th. In the meantime, even though at the time that I'm recording this, the attack happened only mere days ago, the victim has already filed a civil lawsuit. And you gotta love America, folks, where you can get a lawsuit, a complaint filed mere days after an event like this. And I'm not making light of the event, and I'm not saying the victim has a right to sue. He certainly does. I mean, again, we saw that picture. He is severely injured, but just days later, he has already initiated a civil lawsuit. So there's two different things going on against Mark Sanchez. The criminal case, that's where the state, so it's going to be Indiana, is going to decide, prosecute, charge of the felony, bring him to court, and ultimately that does carry a term of potential incarceration. So there's a chance Mark Sanchez can go to jail if he's convicted. But then there's a civil lawsuit. And in civil lawsuits, it's the victim themselves that bring the case. They're called plaintiffs. And they can't put someone in jail. What they're asking for is money. They want to recover money to help make them whole. And in this case, it will be for the injuries that Sanchez sustained. But here's the really interesting part. The victim didn't just sue Mark Sanchez. The victim has also sued Fox, because Mark Sanchez was working for Fox Sports and was in Indianapolis to cover a football game. So they have now joined Fox, which we all know is a mega corporation, to this lawsuit alleging that they have some liability because Mark Sanchez is their employee. Now, we don't need to get into the nitty-gritty, weedy legal arguments. I can say that typically, employers are not held liable for criminal conduct of their employees that occur outside of work time, right? Like, that wouldn't make any sense. Then you can hold any employer liable anytime someone who works for you commits a crime when they're not at work. Now, if they commit a crime while they're on working hours, sometimes you can be held liable, even if the crime is unrelated to their job function. That's why I said we're not going to get in the legal weeds, because that is surprising for some people to learn. But like, wholly unrelated, you go out, you get drunk, and you decide to beat a senior citizen, you're not usually going to be holding the employer liable. What I can say from experience, and this is just experience, speculation, sometimes when plaintiffs initiate suits, especially with large corporations settle the case to make it go away, because lawyers like myself, we're expensive, folks. And even for us to go to court and say, Your Honor, this has nothing to do with us. This was a bad decision made by one of our employees. We don't know what was going on, but it wasn't work time. Went off, committed this offense, alleged offense, completely independent. We should not be properly joined here. We should not be a co-defendant in this case. We need to file a motion to dismiss. That costs money. Now, I mean, I don't know what they're going to do. If I were in a situation like that as a lawyer, I would probably attempt a motion to dismiss before I paid anybody any money. But you got to think, What's more expensive, paying me to go and file that and argue it in front of a court, or just paying someone a settlement? Now, of course, we need the facts to come out. If he was working at the time, I don't know what he was doing behind that alley. I don't know. Then that's different. I mean, that's why we have investigations. And, maybe the victim knows something I don't. I'm just telling you what it looks like from where I'm sitting right here. Mark Sanchez, on the other hand, he's in a very different position. He is definitely looking at some serious liability for inflicting that kind of injury. And again, the big question is why? Is it really you're just mad that this man was parked in an alley? Was he blocking your way from doing your wind sprints at night at like 12:30 at night? Like, why? Why did this escalate into violence? And I think that's what the top prosecutor even said. Like, this didn't have to go there. This didn't have to escalate. Why did he start beating a senior citizen? That I don't have an answer for. Obviously, Mark Sanchez is now a criminal defendant, so he's not talking. He's a Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. If this case ultimately goes to trial, we might find out why. If he pleads guilty to get it over with, he's going to have to plead guilty to a set of facts. They don't need to prove motive, but he might explain why, or maybe he really was severely intoxicated and there is no why. But a lot of people get drunk and they don't beat senior citizens. And I don't know anything about Mark Sanchez other than he played for the Jets. I don't know if he has a history, if he doesn't have a history. I don't know. I know it's all very weird. I know it's all very, very sad. So I will continue to follow this story and provide updates as it unfolds, because I'm very curious about these parallel proceedings, the criminal case, the civil case, and then, of course, I'm just curious as to the why. So if you want to continue to follow this with me, make sure you go ahead and click like and subscribe. And remember to tell folks that at least you heard it here.